For 2,000 years, the Christian church has proclaimed that at the end of his life, Jesus of Nazareth was crucified on a cross, honorably buried, and then on the third day rose from the dead.
The evidence is there, the sources are there, the picture is clear and coherent, and in my academic opinion, the picture is quite compelling.
But others claim Jesus didn't die on the cross. He simply passed out and revived in the tomb. Some modern scholars claim Jesus' body was taken off the cross, thrown on a garbage heap, and devoured by wild dogs. The so-called resurrection appearances of Jesus were nothing more than hallucinations or grief visions, not literal physical appearances of Jesus himself.
Now, if the resurrection had not happened, then we wouldn't be here speaking. There would have been no Christian movement.
I spent 10 years as a skeptic. For me, I wondered if there was any meaning in life. I wondered if when I'm buried, the leaves blow over my grave and that's it, or is there meaning? And for me, I specialized in the research on the resurrection. And you know what? There were times when I wondered what was going to happen with this research, but the conclusion was it led me out of the woods, out of the despair. And for me, the resurrection is what really says life has meaning. There's an eternity, all because Jesus Christ was raised from the dead.
What does an examination of the historical evidence from both secular and Christian sources reveal?
You've got to let Jesus be Jesus. You've got to let him speak for himself and be who he was. Otherwise, you are simply imposing your ideology, your politically correct Jesus, on the Jesus of history, and you will be apt to come up with a Jesus who looks just like you.
What difference does it make in your life if the evidence does lead to the conclusion that Jesus actually rose from the dead?
If Jesus is who he claims to be, then there is an accountability that we all have to Jesus. And that's uncomfortable to confront.
We invite you to join us for this special edition of the John Ankerberg Show and hear world-class historians present the case for Jesus' resurrection.
To introduce our program today, I'd like to begin with a clip from our debate between Dr. Anthony Flew and Dr. Gary Habermas.
Welcome. We have two guests today that are very special that are debating the topic, did Jesus rise from the dead? They are Dr. Anthony Flew, considered by many to be the world's foremost philosophical atheist, a man who has authored more than 23 books, including Hume's Philosophy of Belief, God in Philosophy, Introduction to Western Philosophy, The Presumption of Atheism, and other philosophical essays on God, freedom, and immortality. My second guest is Dr. Gary Habermas, a renowned Christian philosopher and historian who's considered to be, by many, the foremost expert on the evidence, the historical evidence for Jesus' resurrection. Gary's authored 21 books, including The Historical Jesus, Ancient Evidence for the Life of Christ, In Defense of Miracles, and Why Believe God Exists. Gentlemen, we're glad that you are here. And Dr. Habermas, I think the people that are watching right now, we're talking about, did Jesus rise from the dead? They're saying, come on. I mean, you're saying there's evidence, there's facts in history. When you see magazines like Newsweek and Time that come out every 6-8 months, it seems, here's another one on visions of Jesus. You've got all kinds of stuff in these magazines, but they keep on saying there's very little evidence. Now, you come along and you write this little book called The Historical Jesus, and all of a sudden, you talk about the fact that when you were at Michigan State working on your PhD, you were a skeptic yourself, and the fact is the facts brought you to a belief in Jesus. And you have said there are at least 12 historical facts that are virtually agreed by all critical scholars today. I'd like you to let us know what the case is. Start us off tonight.
Well, John, just to name some of those highlights, virtually everybody today thinks that Jesus died due to crucifixion. I mean, John Crossan and others from the Jesus Seminar say that's the most widely known fact in the ancient world. He was buried. He, of course, this event inspired some despair in the disciples. Now, the fact that the tomb was empty is admitted by most scholars, but not as widely admitted as the rest in this list. Probably the single most important fact is that the disciples had experiences that they believed were appearances of the risen Jesus. They were transformed as a result. The resurrection was a central message. They preached in Jerusalem. The church was born. We have some individuals like James and Paul, two former skeptics, one a family skeptic, one an outsider who persecuted Christians. And they also came to Christ by experiences that they believed were appearances of the risen Jesus. And by the way, there's a lot of other scholars today in the historical Jesus movement, way far to the left of me, who also start with lists of facts just like this as sort of a common ground from which we can deal with our data.
Mm-hmm. Now, Tony, what do you think about Habermas's facts there?
Well, I don't dispute those facts, but I want to say yes, but. And the evidential situation is, in many ways, very unsatisfactory. For a start, no one knows in what year the crucial event of the crucifixion and consequently the other events occurred. And this is a very remarkable thing, that no one knows the birth date. Well, there are a great many birth dates of important people that are not known. The other lack is all our evidence is based on documents written by believing Christians, none of whom was himself an eyewitness. And we have absolutely nothing from the rest of the population of Jerusalem to tell us why it was they weren't converted and whether the earthquakes and other alleged miracles actually occurred or not.
Well, what do you think about that, Gary?
Well, now when you say there's none of these early Christian authors are eyewitnesses, of course, I think from your writings you exempt Paul, right? You believe the Apostle Paul wasn't eyewitness.
I was thinking of the Gospel writers.
Right. But with Paul we have an authentic eyewitness, and you would grant a number of authentic Pauline books.
Oh, yeah.
And, but
he wasn't in Jerusalem, of course, at that time.